So, the surface of Venus, and I want you to look this up if you don't believe me, or I would recommend looking it up because you'll know this. In 1981, there was a Russian craft that launched to the surface of Venus. It landed successfully on its surface, and it took 14 still images within 13 hours. The craft eventually lost contact, broke down, and melted on the surface of Venus due to sulfuric acid and 864 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe is the average temperature in the daytime. Not that it really matters because it's hot anyways. But the idea is that this is something else. I was actually talking to some people, I was actually talking to a few scientists recently, and they told me that there was actually proof that we have evidence that, like, for example, that there can be bacteria that can survive extreme hot temperatures. Now, this was new to me because I wasn't really sure what the classification names were, and I might mispronounce them because they are difficult. Well, they're sort of difficult because they're not really something you see too often. But the idea is that they are like what is known as like Acidophiles or something like that. It's like, I know how to spell it though. It's like Acidophiles. And the idea is that there is single-minded bacteria, meaning like just these little bacteria strands you probably need like a microscope to see, can live and survive in the harshest temperatures, and it's immune to acid. For example, your stomach acid, your Venus's atmosphere, sulfuric acid. So we can safely say that Venus has life on it, had life on it in the past, and that's how it evolved. Now the question is, how much different than Venus evolving, like from a planetary evolution, towards humanity? And suppose that there was life on Venus, much like Earth's, around the same time. Is it possible that our ancestors were from another planet? I mean, okay, I'm not trying to get into conspiracy theories here, but it just seems like, the next question would be, at least that point in time, think of it like this, 3.7 years ago, and you might have heard of this one, I've even made a video about this, there was a video talking about, like, there were these scientists that went to Greenland and they found frozen fossils that were actually preserved so perfectly what they actually looked like frozen, but they're easier to break. But they made it to the laboratory, they conducted a lot of tests on them, and pretty much the bacteria that was found on Earth 3.7 billion years ago, even though the planets are 4.7 billion, or at least a little bit older than that, but that's just what we commonly refer to it as anyways. The idea was that bacteria was said to be very similar to that of maybe what is found on Venus, even though Earth's atmosphere is completely more inhabitable, even to this day, than Venus's, because, again, sulfuric acid. The idea is that this is the question that I'm trying to think of. How much different would life have been on Venus's atmosphere versus Earth's? Because the way it works is evolution. You can evolve differently just for being on a different planet. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're just on Venus and then you're on Earth. So, like, for example, if we were to send people to Mars, for example, and they would go to Mars, over millions of years, maybe humans would evolve differently on Mars than if life still existed on Earth millions of years later. So there would be like a comparison between the two. So it'd be really interesting, like, if Venus, and heck, even our moon, but I mean, suppose that all that is true, that, Venus did have life on it, and we were able to somehow compare it side by side to Earth. How much different would that mean in general for the Earth? Like, how much, from an evolutionary standpoint, how much different would life have evolved between the two planets? And if so, even though it might not seem plausible now, but say humans really weren't from just Earth and they were from, like, not just the stars, but rather maybe from another planet, how would we, like, really, what would that mean if we were able to say that maybe humans weren't from another planet, or weren't from here, but, it just seems really interesting to think about that, if you can find life on another planet, then why did their race go extinct? the question really boggles you. It's an answer that we don't have, and it's a question that begs an answer. You know, what Venus, the history of Venus. These planets that just float around in an endless abyss, and yet they're there, but yet we don't have all the answers. But we got a bunch of questions, so what does it all mean?